All right, and we're live. So hey, thanks for tuning in tonight. And my co-host, Mr. Justin Harris, as always, pumped
Thank
and ready
you.
to go.
I am. I just finished working out.
I'm sure he has many stories and scientific rants for the viewers out there tonight. And Miss Mikayla Custance from competing and coaching, great career out there from British Columbia and
British
Canada.
Columbia.
Yeah. What's that?
I said British Columbia, Australia.
Yeah, not Australia, but
No,
so yeah,
I wish.
thanks again for tuning in. Just some quick housekeeping stuff. Be sure to subscribe, like, turn on notifications. As you know, we're going to continue to pump out content with an educational feel to it. This, like other episodes, will have a few segments, so definitely stay tuned. Look for those to launch. And as always, be sure to put your questions in the comment sections below, because all of our guests are always happy to answer your questions in the First Detachment team as well. So with that, now that that's out of the way, welcome to the show. Happy to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we were chatting a little bit before you got on, and just talking about where you are today with competing, and the most recent show was the Arnold Amateur, and we were talking about coaching, and that's kind of how I originally met you. You're doing some pretty just insane transformations for people, which we'll get into as we progress through the show today. So I think that'll be really fun, because I know Justin's had a lot of people know him for his bodybuilding and strongman powerlifting athletes, but he also has had some lifestyle people that he's worked with too. So I think it'll be kind of fun to unpack your approach and go through that. But before we do that, just tell us a little bit what got you here. How did you start with the love for the weights and nutrition and helping people make these positive changes in their life?
Yeah, so I actually started since I was very young riding horses, and I started competing. I did what's called 3-day eventing. So we have 3 days of competition. We do dressage, show jumping, and cross country. And so I did years of that. And when I was 16, I did the BC Champions. And around that time, my mom was like, you need to start watching your nutrition and doing some dry land things that would help you with that. So she actually hired me a personal trainer who also competed in bodybuilding. So I started going and seeing her, and she helped me with nutrition and my training. And I just fell in love with the gym. Like, I enjoyed going to her, enjoyed being pushed, learning about how much your body could change, and how important it was to eat right for your goals. And then about a couple years later, unfortunately, my horse got injured, and that was kind of the end of my riding career. And I kept going to the gym and seeing my trainer, and it was her that was like, why don't you do a show? You should compete. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I was like, how do you compete in fitness? Like, that's a thing.
Sure.
And so she was showing me all these bodybuilding pictures and things, and I was still kind of hesitant, but I'm a very competitive person. I really like to have a goal that I'm always working towards. So I just thought, why not? So a year later, I did my first show, and it was definitely an experience. And I realized I needed a few more years under my belt. So back to the drawing board and back to competing, and just tried to learn as much as possible. And then did another show, and I just kind of started meeting new people. And then I started doing really well and qualifying for different shows. And around that time, people started asking me, what are you doing and training? And you should start training people. And again, wasn't too sure if I wanted to go down the coaching route, because for me, the gym was always kind of my thing. It was where I put my headphones on and be by myself, and it was something for me. And then the more I would just kind of help friends, and they were getting their goals met. So I decided to do the fitness nutrition course, get all of that. And then I just started training people. And from there, the business started growing, and I just kept forming a more love for this sport and for this industry.
Awesome. Well, when you're talking about, just curious to go back to the beginning too, with horseback riding. How old were you when you started? How long did you do that for?
My family owned a farm, so there's pictures of me on a horse at 9 months.
Okay, yeah.
I was doing, local small shows at 3.
Yeah.
And then I kept going until throughout high school, so about 17, 18.
Yeah, so that competitiveness, and it was bred pretty early. Yeah,
that's a pretty involved sport too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, That's actually, you know, you'd think that'd be a really odd transition from the fitness world, or from that to the fitness world, but they're both really, from what I know, my the other dentist in my wife's practice, they do horse showing, whatever, equestrian stuff. So I'm not an expert, obviously, but how involved it is, it's really similar in that it's something. It's not just like, oh, hey, let's go goof around for an hour. It's a full-time thing, just kind of like our sport is. How it's, you know, people think it's, you know, just the training, but it's everything: the eating, the training, the supplements, the rest, and it's something like to really kind of, I mean, most of your day is filled with thinking about it, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also like in bodybuilding, it's you versus you, right? And other competitors. It's not a team sport. And that's the same with the riding. It was always, you know, it was up to me to get my riding in and up to get my fitness and look after my horse. So that I think was an easy transition compared to somebody like, for example, my brother. He always played team sports. So it was always looking for other people too, right? That team kind of mentality. But for me, it was always me, about me and my goals.
It seems like the fact that there's so much training involved too. Cause, you know, like if you're a freak athlete, and typically like the big three sports, that's really what it is. You know, if you weren't born 6'6", 340 pounds, you're not playing left tackle in the NFL. You know, if you can't, you know, jump 30 feet in the air, you're not going to play in the NBA. So those guys, a lot of it is, I mean, obviously they work hard, but a lot of it is just show up on game day and perform. You know, where like in bodybuilding, it's the opposite. All the work is done in the training leading up to it. And I can imagine, it seems like the work with the horse would be really similar to that. It's like, what, you know, because you can't just, I would imagine you can't just show up and you know, and win like you could like in a basketball if you're just a genetic freak or whatever.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. It's a lot of time and practice, and it's also similar to bodybuilding in the sense that when you do a show and say you do really well, you're so excited to compete again,
Right.
but you actually need to wait a few months, right? Like you don't get to do a show every weekend. That's kind of the same with riding too, is you do really well and you can't wait to compete again, but you can't just compete every weekend. You need a break, your horse needs the rest. And it's the same with bodybuilding in the sense that if you don't do well, like for me personally, if I don't do well at a show or I feel I didn't, you know, come in perfect and, you know, I was fifth and not first, my instinct is I need to get back on stage and redo it, right? And you can't. You gotta give yourself the break. It takes time to fix what you need to do. And that's the same with riding too, is you have to have a lot of patience and things like that, compared to if you play soccer every weekend, you get to go back on the field and you know, redo it again. So yeah, the mindset for both really, I think can play hard.
Well, I think it was interesting too, to looking at your history. You know, you started off in 2014, so you've been at it about 10 years, right? In Bikini originally. And if I understand correctly, that went pretty well, right? And then as you kind of progressed, you got some feedback to change there. So can you walk through a little bit of your competition history just for the viewers out there and what that looked like for you?
Yeah, I actually did a couple shows before that too, some local shows. And then 14 was kind of when I took it more seriously and really went for it. So yeah, I originally Nicole, Wilkins and Aaron Stern, they were like who I saw in Oxygen magazine and who I wanted to look like and who I wanted to be. So figure was always kind of my eye on the prize, what I wanted to do. And when I first started out, I didn't have the muscle for figure. So it was a coach that said, well, why don't you try bikini? Why don't you do a bikini show? And so I did bikini in 2014 and ended up winning the show. And then from there, I did the BC. We had the provincials back then. So we did the provincials and then into nationals. And so from the start at 2014 to nationals in 2016, I was still, I'd say, training pretty hard. Like I still wanted to put on the muscle. And at that point, the judges' feedback was, you're starting to get too muscular, especially in your back. You're starting to get more top heavy. And it was basically, okay, do I take maybe a year and a half off and see about how much muscle I can put on and then go up to figure? Or do I have to stop training upper body basically and, you know, switch things around and stay in bikini? And so I told my coach that I really wanted to do figure. So I decided to take that time. And then in 2018, I went and did figure and ended up placing second.
The women, you guys have it, you really have it hard compared to the men, in that the men, I mean, we have different divisions, you know, classic physique, or classic men's physique, bodybuilding, and they're pretty similar in how they compare to each other at each level. The women, it's really a lot different. And I feel for you guys, because a lot of times at a state level show, the bikini competitor will cross over to wellness, and if they have a really good shape, they'll win both classes. But you can't go to a national. I mean, the wellness competitors at the national level are not even the same species as the bikini at that level. You know, and so it's judged really oddly in that. You know, like what places well at the next level isn't always the look that's rewarded at the level before it. And so it's like, not only you have to make a decision with the muscle of a hardness, you also have to decide, like, what level am I at? What gets rewarded at this level? And it's like, so you could come out as a wellness competitor looking similar, like a muscular bikini competitor, dominate. This is at least in America. Canada, I don't have a ton of familiarity with, but you could dominate the state level, win the state championship, go into nationals, think I'm going to kick butt, and you step on stage at nationals where those girls look like bodybuilders, and it's, you know, game over. And so it's like it's a lot of additional like thought and planning for the female competitors compared to the men.
Yeah, no, it's the same in Canada. True, very true. And the other thing too is a lot of the shows now do crossovers, right? So sometimes even at figure, I could be next to somebody who's also in physique, right? And she could place at both physique and figure, right? So yeah, no,
I was gonna say, I think it's interesting too, because you mentioned Nicole Wilkins. Justin and I were reminiscing quite a few episodes ago about all the Michigan people that have kind of, you know, made it out there, and many of them that we trained with. But there's a group of us at, I don't want to misspeak, I'm pretty sure it was her first show that I was at, and she when she won, nationally qualified, or maybe it was her second show. Do you remember that, Justin?
I do. But for years I couldn't remember, because I think I even said that one time on a podcast, and then I was like, God, was that really? I'm glad you remember that.
Yeah, it's early 2000s at the Redford Theater. And the only reason why I remember is, like, 10 years later, someone has a magazine and she's on a cover, and I'm like, I know that face. And I looked at it twice and reread it. I was like, I know who that is. So it's just funny, you know.
Same thing. It was like a forgotten memory for me also. It's funny. Yeah.
But she really marketed herself well, because there's a lot of people like yourself, it sounds like, Mikayla, that, you know, she influenced in the sport, which is you know, just kind of interesting to hear, you know, from the same area that we competed in. We were all competing at the Redford Theater in Detroit, Michigan. That was kind of where a lot of people got started. So
yeah, that's a whole interesting. You can do a whole podcast on that. Redford Theater is right off 8 Mile, which, you know, the movie 8 Mile with Eminem, and that's the heart of that, the heart of 8 Mile, basically. You know, you're dodging gunshots to get on stage, and I mean, most of the guys move out, but a lot of like pros came from that area. You know, Steve Kuklo came from there, Brian Peziers, Karen Zaremba, Tim Hensley's a world record holder bench presser, all from this. I'm not the Detroit's a little area, but like the gym we trained at was a little gym, you know.
Right.
It's kind of, not to get too sidetracked, but
no, it's just interesting to hear you kind of bring that up. And then as you're talking through that, you know, you had a really strong finish at the was that the last one you did then in 2022, the Arnold Amateur?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about, you know, that experience. Like, what was that show like for you leading up to it, and how it turned out?
Well, it was stressful in a way you wouldn't think, because it was kind of during COVID. So I'm prepping for this show, and I'm like, am I going to be able to cross the border?
Oh yeah, that's true.
So that was
yeah,
especially Canada, right? Because getting back, I'd imagine, was pretty tough too.
That was one reason I took such a long break, because the last show I did was in 2019, and then COVID hit. So I was like, well, can't do anything anyway, so I might as well just, you know, hang out at the gym and train as hard as I can for a year. And then I was going to do 21, and then in Canada, shows kept getting shut down. And I was like, I can't mentally train and prep for a show that I know a week out might not happen. Right. Like, I know girls that did that. They had nationals. They flew all the way to Toronto, got to the airport. Health Canada shut the show down, and they had to turn around and come back. So I had friends, and I've actually got family too in the States. And they're like, why don't you come down here? They're like, stuff is opening up and shows are happening. So I was like, well, I could do the Arnold Amateur. So I decided to prep for Arnold Amateur, and it was a great show. I'd never been to that expo before. I'd been to the Olympia, but the expo was so fun, and there's so many great people there, and it was a really, really great show.
Yeah, I
the
believe this
Arnold's
is
an
your-
experience. It's a. I hope. I'm worried about the Arnold right now with the Olympia being so late in the year, so close to the Arnold. It's. I mean, they almost canceled the amateur Arnold this year. They did for like 2 weeks.
I
And
saw
so,
that. Yeah, I was wondering why they were doing
well,
that.
right now there's only 6 men bodybuilders in the men's pros lineup right now. I mean, they just did the Olympia. It's unfortunate because the Arnold. There was a period of time where people debated which what was the better show, the Arnold or the Olympia. The Olympia obviously was better, but it was the exact same competitors. The only difference was Mr. Olympia typically only did the Olympia, and then the Arnold was all the Olympia competitors again. Where I mean they're losing that, and that was across all divisions. It was like that, and now with moving the Olympia so late in the year to December, these guys they can't hold conditioning for 9 weeks. I mean you could, but you're not going to do that very many years before your body starts failing you. So for such a big event and such a showcase event how so many people learn about the sport from that expo. I mean, it kind of looks like you understand the sport, but you go in that expo where there's 250,000 people walking through over 3 days. That's like how many fitness fanatics you basically cut their teeth there. So I hope it doesn't go away.
Yeah. I wonder if are they changing the Olympia back to September next year?
I hope so. I hope so. It's for the sport. I mean, I think it's really going to put a damper on it between COVID and then the time now, and then now the Arnold, the competition, the competitor list is dwindling down so much. They canceled the amateur for a couple of weeks. Now it's back on. It'd just be a real shame because that years ago, I mean, the first Arnold in '89 was on NBC. I mean. Yeah, I mean that's Arnold is the biggest name, and so that was our chance to. We're never going to be mainstream, but that was our chance to really get broad appeal and have people see we're it's not just meatheads. There's a lot involved with this, but
it's too bad.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to pull up some of the images here. So this is from that show, correct? So showing off your hardware there. Good stuff. So that was the second place finish, right?
Stage pictures up there too.
Yeah, I'll try to back out of this a little bit here. Just give me a second. What are some things, as I'm kind of messing with this to pull it up, what are some things that stuck out in your physique that at the show? I think this is one of them.
For me
here.
Personally, I felt like it was my best look so far. I definitely, have a bit more that I want to work on, just building my back and my lats up a little bit more quads, a bit more hamstrings. So that's what I've kind of been working on, is just a bit more of a building phase.
Sure.
That's the other thing too with the sport. It's always evolving, right? Like you look back at Nicole Wilkins' look versus Sydney's look now, right? It's changing so much. So there's always more to improve on, for sure.
And that's what hooked me 100%. When I've told a story, not to hijack the thing, but I've told the story multiple times. But as a kid, I was just like a nothing burger, just the middle. No one, I don't even know if anyone knew I existed. Not great at sports, not just in the middle. And then for whatever reason, I stumbled on a gym. I think I saw a Flex magazine, or it might have even been the Arnold on NBC. And I was mesmerized by it. And then you go to the gym and you're super weak, but it was fun. And then you're sore and you're excited. And then you go back the next time and you're a little stronger. And for me, that was mind blowing. I can work at something and change myself. I could improve. And everything in my life since then was I feel like it was a different path where, that wherever I'm at in life, I don't have to be there. It's just time and effort in a different area, and a lot of people maybe get that early on or understand that, but I really didn't. I thought the smart kids were smart, the athletic kids were athletic, and that was it. You were either you're born how you were. I didn't really understand that a lot of what you do in life is, you get what you give, basically. And it really changed my life anyways.
Oh, definitely. Your confidence and everything goes so far up, and you learn so much about yourself too in this sport.
Yeah, especially in a prep. You learn a lot about yourself.
If you can do prep, you can do anything.
Yeah. Well, let me pull up this comparison here. Just curious to get some feedback especially for female listeners. Was there, this is your 2019 to 22 changes. What are the key changes that you saw in your physique, and what are maybe some things you worked on in between these two shows?
Definitely my back was kind of my goal. I really wanted to get more of the V taper. I still need to get, when I still want to be a little bit more leaner in my hamstrings and into my glutes. That was my biggest feedback. But definitely my back and my shape was what I was really focusing on.
You really improved your lat width. That's impressive.
Thank you.